Namaste. Okay, hi. Well, I noticed the sound quality on a lot of my last videos were, the volume is just very low. You almost need headphones. So I got this, I found this little microphone I actually had. So hopefully it's better. So I realized that, while a couple of you know some about me, many of you are just listening to the videos and seeing my post, but don't really know anything about me as a person. So I'd like to give you a little history, tell you Brian's story, and also my story, and my birth, the birth of Anata. Anata means infinite, infinity, unending, and Amara means undying, or unvanquished. And there's a reason I chose that particular name. But well, my childhood was typical. Well, only typical because the country's pretty messed up and the world's pretty messed up. Egos are pretty messed up. There was a good bit of abuse, physical abuse, and some other types. In any case, whatever. There was abandonment issues. My dad, I never met my dad, my real dad anyways. But the main thing to know is that, I came into young adulthood with no sense of self, completely lost, completely disconnected from everything, including myself. And I started getting into trouble. I formed an attitude, young, that nice guys finish last. And although I was never, I was never one to pick on innocent people or weaker people. I was never a bully, but I was definitely troubled. I was a troublemaker for sure. And I ended up I did something pretty stupid when I was 18. And I ended up in maximum security federal penitentiary, for close to 10 years. And when I went in there, I was 18, 140 pounds. Just a kid. I was just a troubled kid. However, the places they put me were 80% or so had life sentences, were never going home, and were all violent, pretty much. People think of federal prison like it's just summer camp, like it's sweet, but that's the low security ones in the camps where the white collar criminals go. But the maximum security federal penitentiary is for, gang leaders, hitmen, violent gang lords, drug lords. There was a CIA agent, espionage. You get a lot of military prisoners overflow, spies, terrorists, bank robbers. So basically, that type of situation is one where you cannot pretend to be anything. Well, you can pretend to be something, but you can't pretend to be tough and really be terrified, basically I was terrified, of course. It was terrifying place they put me the first time. It was USP Atlanta was the first place I went. And, you know, this was like a castle. It was like built in 1890 or something. And, yeah, just a horrible place. But, so quickly, I had a hard time in the beginning, and then I started to learn how to fight. Some guys, I got in some fights, and some guys liked my courage, they called it. I was actually terrified, but the fact that I acted was enough, really, to get a little bit of respect from them. So they started teaching me martial arts, teaching me how to fight, different guys. And for a couple years I studied martial arts, I fought, and then they sent me to another penitentiary, which was more dangerous, which was really just terrible. And in there, the Aryan Brotherhood was pretty deep, were the Nazi lowriders or the other white supremacist gangs that were there. There was lots of them, but the Aryan Brotherhood called the shots. So I never joined or anything. I didn't want any part of it. However, if you're white, they consider you their property. They consider that you will either pay them protection. There's a spider on my phone. You will either pay them protection, or you will be a soldier for them, or you will be so crazy that you're willing to kill anything that moves and be that kind of person, and then they might leave you alone. So they caused me a lot of trouble, and then finally I got to a point where something snapped inside me. I was fairly convinced that I was gonna die inside. I was gonna die in there. So I became fearless for the first time. Now, it wasn't truly fearless like I know now, but it was close. It was just resolved that I was gonna die anyways. It didn't matter, and I wasn't gonna just go out like that, you know. I just didn't want to. I just wasn't willing to allow anyone to mess with me anymore. So basically, I became something different. You know, a much more dangerous person. And then when I got out of there finally, well, for one thing, towards the end of it, prior to going in, okay, I was not raised racist. However, I was raised white. You know, I had black friends growing up because I lived in South Florida and it was fairly integrated, you know. But you know, it's not that I was racist. I just had my own prejudices that I didn't even know were prejudices, you know. I didn't really identify them yet. You know, I just grew up with certain privileges that American white people do. So it's not hard for someone to twist that into your faults are really because of someone else, or to say that your accomplishment in life compared to someone else is truly all your own doing, instead of that fact that you have an upper hand in society. So for a while I was fed this stuff, and being that I just wanted camaraderie, I didn't want to be alone in there, you know. There was a little bit where I even started listening to some of that stuff, but fundamentally I could never accept the fact that they were trying to tell me that black people were complete, just the way they describe them is like they're subhuman, like they're not even really human. And I happen to know some black people that were freaking geniuses, just unbelievable people. Smarter than me. I mean, just and I'm highly intelligent. I was always considered highly intelligent as a human, anyways, by human standards. But so I never fully accepted that stuff. What they really played on in me was the fact that growing up, I had when I went to juvenile hall, I was mistreated pretty badly by the black people in there because they also were growing up racist as a reaction to what white people did to them. And you know, I was the minority in there, so for the first time they're the majority. And you know, they do what kids do, and they ganged up on me. But you know, it's not like white people couldn't have done the same thing, or we haven't done worse to them. Yeah. So that means nothing. But still, they were able to play on that a little bit, so that for a minute, I did feed into it a little. But I quickly saw through it, and I quickly grew to hate them. I realized just that they are just terrible people. And finally, towards the end, you know, I finally was free of them because I just wasn't going to take anything from anyone, no matter the consequences to them or me. So, fast forward, let's see, I get out, and, well, I get out, and I'm 28 almost. Is that right? I was like 27, something like that. And, first of all, so I've never worked a real job, really, except a tiny bit when I was 18. So I spent the whole time in there just listening to these criminals tell me their stories. And effectively, I followed in their footsteps. I became an intentional criminal, a professional criminal, if you will. Although the lifestyle, and I was fairly successful at it, it's just that the lifestyle eventually led me into drugs. Well, I led myself into drugs. It was my unhappiness, my deep unhappiness, because through it all, no matter what type of lifestyle I managed to achieve, I was deeply unhappy. Deeply unhappy, and I didn't understand why. Oh, one thing I forgot to say is that there was a time in prison where I was in solitary confinement for about 10 months. And in that time, I started really just devouring books on spirituality. I just read everything I could. Buddhism, Hinduism, just everything. Jainism, everything I could read. And I started meditating. And I got to a place where I had control of the mind. I could silence it, but I now realize I was silencing it by holding it. Like, it wasn't a natural, relaxing, so it wasn't actually my natural state. I was holding my attention on the breath or whatever it is. Regardless, I got to a point, though, where I stopped sleeping. I was just meditating. I didn't talk to anyone for about 6 months. And then this is towards the end of my sentence, I got to a point where every time I meditated, my third eye was opening up, and a tunnel was opening up before me. And I had the overwhelming feeling that if I went through that tunnel, I would die. And, you know, having heard stories of people take Mahasamadhi and burst into flame, spontaneous combustion, it seemed completely possible to me that I could actually die. And it scared the crap out of me. Little did I know that this was actually ego death I was coming to, and I could have had it right then at 18. Excuse me, I was 25 at the time. At 25, I could have had it then. But I didn't. I ran from it. I gave up the meditation completely. It scared me that bad, and I went completely the other way, you know. So, let's see, about 5 years of that went on with me being out, and like I said, I was I was deeply sad, deeply unsatisfied with myself, and I had no control really over myself. So eventually it led me back to prison. And this time in prison, because I was in state prison in Pennsylvania, and it's much nicer. It's not violent. It's not racist like that, you know. Everybody just pretty much gets along, actually. So in there I just worked out and minded my own business, and I grew a lot in there. I grew a lot. I became kind of like a mature adult in there finally. And then I got out and I didn't want any part of jail anymore. And for about 2 years, 2.5 years, I lived the most normal life I could. I got married, had kids. I've got 2 daughters and another on the way. But however, through all of this which should have made me happy, I wasn't. I still wasn't happy. So then, I had tried psychedelics when I was younger, and I liked them. And then I just couldn't find them. Then I came across some mushrooms, and I took them, and I felt like I was getting this download of information, like this massive, like something greater than me grabbed me and was just downloading energy and information into me, and I was just seeing these symbols and glyphs roll by. So about 6 months went by before I found it again, and I wanted to see if I could contact it again. And I had the feeling that this could help me with my life. And I started listening to some about mushrooms and LSD, about other people's experience, and I realized that this sounded very similar to what I thought was going to happen to me when I was meditating back then. The ego deaths they were experiencing on mushrooms sounded like what had happened to me, that I didn't fully go through with when I was younger. So I started taking mushrooms regularly, like every week, searching consciously for this experience that these people were talking about, this experience of oneness. And I found several things that were close. Then about 2 weeks, I also started listening to Alan Watts around that time. And, you know, when I started listening to Alan Watts, the Buddhist stuff I had read started to make sense to me in a different way. Before, I didn't, when I was younger, I just wasn't ready for it, and I didn't fully grasp the information. Now it started to make natural sense to me. And then, after listening to Alan Watts, maybe the first time or within a couple days, I took mushrooms and I meditated. And this time, instead of like taking mushrooms and looking for the vision, because I realized that the visions I was seeing were generated within the mind, and therefore were what everyone was telling me was ego. Even if, like dreams, they had hints of a greater truth coming from the higher self or whatever, or the subconscious, wherever they're coming from. But so this time I resolved that I would meditate and completely ignore the thoughts. Now, my mind was completely wild still at this point, but because the mushrooms were making my thoughts visual, so I was actually seeing my thoughts right there in plain view and with eyes open, right in front of me. So because they were doing that, and I wasn't paying them any attention, I was just looking at them, just observing them like I was supposed to, and suddenly I realized I was looking at them. I was looking at my thoughts. This because now I could see them with my eyes. And then I realized, wait, I've always been looking at them. There's a distance between me and them, and suddenly the perspective shifted. And I didn't go backwards, but I went within. And then suddenly, I wasn't Brian. Something popped, I woke up, and I wasn't Brian. And in fact, I realized I had never been Brian. I was God. I mean like full on, like Jesus, like that type of manifestation of God. It was that powerful. I mean, it felt that way to me, at least. So I have this experience. Suddenly, I am that. I look over. My wife is asleep. I was meditating in the bedroom, the lights off. My wife's asleep, and I can see above her, like as if it's being projected there, what she's dreaming. And she's having a nightmare, I realize. So immediately I went over, and of course it doesn't feel like she's my wife, because I don't feel like Brian anymore. She just, to me, appears to be me. Just another manifestation of me. So I touched her, and I basically said, why so much pain? Why so much pain, child? Like that. And I touched her head. I said, awaken. And she woke up immediately. And she looked at me and she said, what? Why do you look like that? You're glowing. Yeah, so it had full manifestation of Siddha powers, because at least to her, that I appeared to be glowing. And she said my touch felt like electricity. She'd never felt anything like it. So I tried to soothe her as best I could, and then I touched her on the forehead and said sleep, and she went right back to sleep. My daughter had also woken up, so I touched her forehead, and she went right back to sleep. Which is not something she does, by the way. So then, this experience lasted maybe 6 hours. Later, well, that's enough on that. So it lasted about 6 hours, and then when I went to sleep, I woke up as Brian again. So I hadn't actually transcended the ego, only temporarily. I had not actually gotten rid of it. But so what this was called, had it not been on mushrooms, had it been a more conventional experience, it would have been what in Zen they call satori, or a sudden realization of truth. It was colored a little bit by the experience of the mushrooms, but you got to understand, or if you don't understand, that whatever experience you are having is being generated within you. It's not the mushrooms that can create an experience of amazing miracles and colors and all these things. All that is created within you. All the mushrooms are doing is slightly changing the way your brain wiring is working so that you don't get in the way of your own intelligence. At least not as much. Now, if you have a chaotic mind on mushrooms, you will just see constant visions and dreams and be completely wrapped up in them, whether that's beautiful or frightening. But with a silent mind on mushrooms, the truth is, what they did for me, because I don't really need them anymore, I don't use them anymore, but what they did for me back then was they made me what I am now, my true expression of myself, or they brought me closer to it when I was not there yet. Somehow they fast forwarded me, But so I started, consistently taking mushrooms about twice a week, and meditating a lot, and studying and listening to videos and Ramana and Nisargadatta, Shunyamurti, just Krishnamurti, everyone I could find, you know. Uh, uh, so I 2 other times had similar type of awakenings on mushrooms. And then I had one that was completely different. It was also on mushrooms. It was on a small dose of mushrooms, though. Almost immediately after taking them, I sat down to meditate, and the world itself completely vanished for a moment. Wait, no, I'm sorry. It did not vanish. But overlaid over it appeared a matrix, what they call Akasha, or Indra's net of jewels, or web of jewels, the web of life. It looks very similar to the map of dark energy in the universe. It also looks very similar to the map of the neurons of the brain. But so I saw this energy overlaying reality. And the reason I said it vanished is because I went into that, and then I was gone from here for a while. And I was in this matrix. And in this matrix that I saw appeared to me, this is the best way to describe it with words that I can think of. So the matrix itself appeared as blue energy. Wait, excuse me. Pinkish purple energy. And I understood that this was spirit. This was spirit in manifestation. So, although it appeared as a stream of energy to me there, as a web, here in this reality it appears as these forms. And off of each node or intersection of these lines of energy were blue vortexes of perpendicular energy. So this, I realized, was soul. So basically I was looking at a matrix of the earth projecting our consensus reality that was all the souls on the planet held together by a matrix of spirit. And this spirit was, you know, the trees, the rocks, the animals, you know, these are all spirit, while we have souls, while we feel individual, you know, individual things. Not that we're made of anything different, of course. We're all made of consciousness. But, so in this experience, I transcended time completely. Time and space, to the point that when I came back from the experience, for a long time I was answering people's questions before they asked them. And it was very weird because I could see different timelines at once. It was a very odd experience. But I also realized right then, this was my first true experience of the type of samadhi where everything is exploding into everything else, to where I had felt the connection before, the oneness, when I was in these higher states of consciousness, which I call God consciousness, but I realize now they were just higher states of consciousness. They were not the absolute. I was not seeing them with 100% clarity. So, but in this experience, I had this full-on, just everything was just melting into everything else. I could not tell where I began and where I stopped, that whole thing. And it lasted for about a day. And however, when it was over, it was over. The ego still returned. It wasn't until about my 5th experience, which we're talking about 6 weeks or 7 weeks after the first one, where I had my first sober experience, for one thing, because I realized that I could not consider this mine. I mean, I could not consider this as being fully real, even though I understood that whatever state of consciousness I'm in is created by me. I could not consider it such without doing it sober, without finding it sober. So the first time that I really found silence, like just utter silence of the mind, I suddenly just realized, which this is often for most people, and had I not found this path with the help of mushrooms, if it had been meditation, I probably would have realized this one first. But I had various other experiences leading me to this. But finally I realized that there's no such thing as mind. It's not even there. It's only an appearance when there's a thought. Outside of that, it has no reality. So this realization shattered the ego, and there was utter silence, and I just burst out laughing, just hysterical fits of laughter, because I realized that all my suffering, and I had had a lot, all my pain was created by me. It was all created by me, because I also realized fully right then that there was no one other than me. I wasn't a part of God. I was God. There's only God. All of this is just an appearance within the mind of God. Like rays of sunlight coming off the sun. There's still only one sun. There's still only one source. And except, in truth, we never went away. We're only an appearance. We have no reality. Our form has no reality. And our thoughts have no reality. So this was true enlightenment. Because it was the realization that my troubles only exist, my pain only exists when the thoughts are happening, and I can always find silence. I realize that I can always, from that point on, find silence. Now, it didn't turn out to be that smooth. I still got lost in ego for weeks at a time, because ego is very crafty, and it does not want to let go. It doesn't. Until finally I came to a place where I was just being in awareness, just being in absolute consciousness. But I had been there for a while in this experience. I had been there for a while this time. Maybe an hour, I think, maybe 2. No, actually, it was like 3 hours. Well, I had been in that place for an hour, but I had been meditating for like 3. It took me about 2 hours to get out of the ego. This was after about 2 weeks of ego. It took me about 2 hours to get out of the ego, and about an hour to really just sit in that field of pure awareness. And as I sat in there, as I expanded out into that infinite space, I felt that there was less and less of me. And even though I had already gone beyond the ego, I thought, even though I had already achieved enlightenment to an extent, I had not yet experienced the totality of the absolute with no ego. 100% gone. With 100% clarity. And so as I went out further and further, there was suddenly a panic. A panic arose in me of the void that I was expanding into, of the nothingness. But I sat down with a full-on panic attack at this point, feeling like I was going to die. I sat down. So for the second time, I had ego death. Maybe I didn't tell you about the other one, but I did have another experience of ego death before this. But so for the second time, I felt like I was dying, and I just breathed through it, and I said, so be it. Whatever is. And then I was suddenly, the world, if you know what a fractal is, fractal patterns emerged of blackness and just spun around until they ate the whole world. And then I was gone too. There was no me, nothing. Just blackness, just void. For some period of time. I'm not sure how long, because it was timeless in a sense. So I guess forever I was there. I'm there now. I'm still there. But so then I came back. Oh, also, on the way coming back, I had a vision of Shiva. First of all, I understood that what I was looking at was what they call Shiva. This nothing was Shiva, and I understood it 100%, that I was this. Om Namah Shivaya. I was Shiva. I understood this 100%, including all of Shiva's mythos, including all of Shiva's incarnations, such that they are. Meaning those people with whom Shiva has lived, but also the myths of Shiva, meaning the beliefs of the worshippers of Shiva through the years. I got a sense of all of this at once. And then I came back into the body to the point where I could see the physical reality again, except I didn't feel the body at all. Instead, it felt like there was a giant hole here, like a black hole, like a magnet that was drawing the whole universe. And I actually could only feel that universe. I couldn't feel the whole. I couldn't feel this emptiness. All I could feel was everything else. And even in talking to people while I was in this state, I was talking to my wife, and it was such an odd thing because she was having a disagreement with me, and I could not understand it because I felt like her more than I felt like me. So, and also I had a vision, not a vision, but I don't know how I had it, just a knowing of an understanding of how it is that we can all manifest our own reality and yet live in a consensus reality where certain things happen for all of us. Prior to this, I didn't understand it. And later I came across this in quantum physics and consciousness studies, the same, to them it's a theory, but I realized that basically it seemed to me then that there's an infinite honeycomb, if you want to think of it like that. And in each little honeycomb or in each little bubble is consciousness, because that's all there is. Now the honeycomb is not actually real. It's an appearance that has been created by prime intelligence, by us, to separate, to create the illusion of separation for each individual consciousness now. So in each little bubble, in each little hexagon or whatever I saw, there's a separate consciousness. Now, because infinity, any part of infinity is also infinite, because infinity is ever big. So that means that each part of the consciousness, even when we feel separate, even as the separate identification of what we would call the soul, even this in itself is infinite. And this is why they say we were created in God's own image. In God's image. Not that he looks like a man, but we are made from infinity. But moreover, that whole thing, from the largest perspective, which is the infinite perspective, is one intelligence. And the appearance of the bubbles within it, the separation, is simply being manifested by that intelligence to create these experiences within it. So each one of us, in effect, as consciousness, even when the ego is gone, still your soul, you're still, while manifest, while in body, you're still a perspective point of infinity. So you are an experience point of the divine. So in each one of these little bubbles is our whole universe. Now your universe, if your eyes are closed, is simply that field, unless you have thoughts that you're thinking about, or visions or dreams. But if you're sitting in your bedroom, your universe is your bedroom. It's whatever is within your experience, within your field of experience, is completely manifested by the infinite you. So when you step outside, like right now, I can look up at the sky and look how much greater my field of awareness is than when I'm just sitting in a room, right? Because now I can see way over there, and if I can see it, then I'm aware of it. It's in my field of awareness. But in truth, the field of awareness, which is our true nature, is infinite. It's infinite. As are all things with us, you know? So, but even after this experience of Shiva, although I would say, I am just pulling a number out of my butt, but so let's say 90% of Brian didn't come back from that. 10% did. So the part that came back was mainly my sticking points, my resistances, my bad habits, if you will. Some of them were resolved, but some of them still persisted. And what this created in me is, since I was telling myself I am God, I shouldn't be feeling this. I shouldn't be experiencing this. I shouldn't be doing this. And by doing that, I had identified myself as a person. I had not accepted that the creator of this reality is God itself, is spirit. I had not accepted that whatever happens is my own will. So therefore, I was recreating the ego. This gave a space for ego. It moved me out of authenticity, moved me away from truth, and ego reemerged. And this, for a month or two, this went back and forth. In ego, out of ego, in ego. It started to slow down, less and less time in ego. My normal state had become more and more like my meditative states. And in fact, now, basically, my only state is that meditative state. I can deepen it, of course. I can focus it more inward, more on the absolute. But so finally, like I've said in some of my other videos, I realized that I wasn't supposed to be feeling shame and guilt. I wasn't supposed to be judging these experiences. I wasn't supposed to be fighting and resisting them. When they arose, I was simply supposed to bring that to pure awareness, bring that experience without judgment as it is to the light of God. And then it will be removed. And if it's not removed the first time, then it'll be removed the second or the third. What happens, happens. What happens, happens. There is no such thing as the past. So what time is an illusion. There is only the now. Time doesn't exist at all in the way most people perceive it. So there's only the now. So therefore, it doesn't matter what you did 5 minutes ago. You could have just relapsed. You could be a spiritual person but have used to be a drug addict or something like that. You could have just relapsed, gone out and got high for 3 weeks, not meditated at all, whatever. At any moment, you can realize the truth that you are perfection, that you are that. At any moment. When you start to realize it at every moment, then you're there. Then miracles happen. Alright. I love you all. Take care. Namaste.